Very good. I congratulate whoever prepared that wonderful beverage. It's 2:22 on the 22nd day of February, the year 1997, the 265th anniversary of the birth of George Washington. And we're gathered here to celebrate that fact. My name is Henry Stern. I'm Commissioner of Parks and Recreation for the City of New York, and I'm here on behalf of Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, who sends his best wishes to each and every one of you. We are here in the Morris Jumel Mansion, which is one of the historic properties which is owned by the City of New York through Parks and Recreation, and is administered in a collaboration with the community and historical associations over the years. We have an enormous debt to the Washington Headquarters Association and to all of those people who've given of their own time and effort to keep this building, to restore this building, and to make it beautiful. It's just a total honor to be speaking in a place like this on an occasion of this sort. Before we begin, I'd like to share a passage from Washington's Rule of Civility and Decent Behavior in Company and Conversation, which our guest orator Barry Bostwick will read in depth in a few moments. The sixth rule states, "Sleep not when others speak." Of course, it's the responsibility of the speaker to keep his audience awake. It works both ways. George Washington, of course, is probably one of the most renowned of Americans. He's, along with Abraham Lincoln, he's the one the capital of the United States is named for, and a state, and a number of universities, and a bridge nearby, and the neighborhood, Washington Heights. There are many ways in which we remember him, formally and informally. We had a playground, as a matter of fact, that was named for him on 100th Street and 1st Avenue, 99th Street. I renamed it Cherry Tree Playground, and we planted cherry trees there because of a historic deed with which he is accredited. Perhaps how do you pronounce apocryphally? Or is it apocryphally? I know it's apocryphal, but how do you make it into an adverb? Anyway. Falsely, right. Don't start words you don't know. Anyway, he was born on this day in 1732 in Mount Vernon, Virginia? In Virginia? What?
Wakefield.
In Wakefield, Virginia. That is good to know. I did not know, and nobody knew that besides you. Wakefield, Virginia, in 1732. Now, wasn't it February 11th old style or something like that? Wasn't there a gap of 11 days, which was changed at one point?
That's the convention.
That is the convention, right. But it was under the Gregorian calendar, which was adopted in 1582. As a leader of the Virginian opposition to British colonial policy, he served as a delegate to the Continental Congress between 1774 and 1775. When the Revolutionary War broke out, Congress named George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Forces. He took command on July 3rd, 1775, leading his troops through the miseries of war until October 19th, 1781, over 6 years. He finally retired from the Army in 1783, the year of the Treaty of Paris, and then went on to preside over the Federal Constitutional Convention. When the government was organized, George Washington was chosen as the first President of the United States, taking office on April 30th, 1789, right here in New York City. In fact, he was sworn into the Sub-Treasury building on Wall Street. He served 2 terms. Throughout his presidency, and even now, several hundred years later, he is remembered as a humble leader who understood the limits of power. In his famous farewell address, Washington said, "Though in reviewing the incidents of my administration, I am unconscious of intentional error, I am nevertheless too sensible of my defects not to think it probable that I may have committed many errors. Whatever they may be, I fervently beseech the Almighty to avert or mitigate the evils to which they may tend. I shall also carry with me the hope that the faults of incompetent abilities will be consigned to oblivion, as myself must soon be to the mansions of rest." You know what that is. Right. Can you imagine a president saying that today? Well, this founding father is indeed remembered, but not for his faults. He's remembered for the unparalleled leadership through which he transformed this country. And what better place to hold this birthday celebration than this gracious mansion, which was built around 1765 and which served as Washington's military headquarters during part of the Revolutionary War. He not only slept here, he worked here. Up on the 2nd floor was the command post. The home was originally built by the British Colonel Roger Morris as a summer house. It was a regular house when he went way downtown. When the Revolutionary War broke out, Morris, a loyalist, returned home to England. During the war, this building was a very valuable asset because it provided views of downtown Manhattan, New Jersey, and Westchester. Washington's office is still preserved here, available for touring and viewing at the Morris Jumel Mansion. Those were its great days, but that was 200 years ago. After the war, the Revolution, the mansion was confiscated by the American government and became Calumet Hall, a popular tavern along the Albany Post Road. In 1810, Stephen Jumel and his wife Eliza bought the house. When Eliza Jumel died in 1865, the same year Abraham Lincoln died, the house had a few more private owners before it was bought by the city of New York in 1903. It opened as a public museum the next year. This house is the oldest surviving private house in the borough of Manhattan. Before we introduce our special guest reader, I'd like to take a moment to read an excerpt from one of Washington's most eloquent speeches, his first inaugural address, delivered the day I told you, April 30th, 1789. "I behold the surest pledges that as on one side no local prejudices or attachments, no separate views, nor party animosities will misdirect the comprehensive and equal eye which ought to watch over this great assemblage of communities and interests." That's wonderful. And you also know another thing that's different now from those days, you know he wrote it himself. There's no Washington's ghost that's lurking in the shadows until he writes his own book. So he did. I would now like to introduce Peter Apgar, who is director of the Morris Jumel Mansion and Museum. Peter? By the way, his new park name is Octagoner, which he chose because this room has 8 sides.
Thank you all for coming today. It's a wonderful day and George Washington's birthday, and I would not be doing my job if I did not quiz some of you in the history of the house. Now, Commissioner Stern started this story but left out some important parts that I would like to explain a little bit. The house itself is a beautiful Palladian structure built 1765 by Roger Morris and his American wife, Mary Phillips, of the prominent colonial New York Phillips family. Now, they lived here for only a short period of time. As we know, the Revolutionary War broke out in 1776, and George Washington was moving up Manhattan Island after a retreat from the Battle of Brooklyn Heights. And it was from here that George Washington, well, he did not only sleep here, as Commissioner Stern was saying, but we like to say, well, he lived here perhaps even. He was here for about 1 month, and this was the Revolutionary headquarters for additional 2 months. From this house, George Washington orchestrated the Battle of Harlem Heights, which took place about present-day 120th Street here in Manhattan. Now, it's a little-known battle, however, it's very significant. This was the first organized victory by American regular soldiers against British regulars. It proved in a very vital, vital time that Americans can beat the British in open battle. And we know the rest of the story, but in many ways it started here in Upper Manhattan. The house also, after Revolutionary War, in 1810, in fact, went to the Jamel family, Stephen and Eliza Jamel. Mrs. Jamel was an extravagant, wonderful woman who lived here for 55 years. And I hope you all are able to make it upstairs to see her life-size portrait, which was painted in 1865, just before she passed away at the age of 93. At one time, she was also married to Aaron Burr for about 2 years. So Aaron Burr lived here as well. So when you come here to visit the museum, there are several stories that you will learn. We will talk about the colonial era, the era of George Washington, and also the Jamels and Aaron Burr. So I hope you enjoyed the rest of today's program and are able to stay afterwards for tours of the mansion. Thank you.
Now we finally understand why it's the Morris Jumel Mansion. It has 2 names. Morris built it in 1765, but he has fled to England 10 years later, and Madame Jumel lived here for 55 years, from 1810 to 1865, with Aaron Burr as her house guest and husband. It sounds like Eliza Jumel sounds like Elizabeth Taylor. I'd like now to introduce, say a word, Scott Heil, a person whose park name is Highlander and who is head of our Historic House Trust, its executive director, and he is the person who, as my appointee in the trust board, has been working to bring all 16 historic houses into best of condition, and we've just added a 17th, the Little Red Lighthouse under the Great Gray Bridge, also right here in Washington Heights. Highlander?
I just want to thank everybody for coming up to Morris Jumel Mansion today. We try to have more than just historic preservation with bricks and mortar. We try to have events that celebrate the people that lived in these houses. And of course, this is one of our flagship houses, the Morris Jumel Mansion. And we're celebrating Washington today. So it's more than just celebrating the beautiful patrimony of these buildings, but the people who inhabited them and the people who really made us the city that we are. And as Commissioner said, we have 17 historic museums throughout the city, and it's a wonderful story to tell because most people think of parks as trees and water and playgrounds, but we do have an extraordinary collection of 17 museums representing everything from the very oldest standing building in New York, the Wyckoff, to Bartow Pell, which is a great mansion in Pelham Bay. And we can also say, I think significantly, that we have not one, but 2 houses where George Washington slept here. And the other is Van Cortlandt Mansion in the Bronx. And we will be celebrating the 100th anniversary of Van Cortlandt as a museum. and followed by the 250th anniversary of Van Cortlandt. So look forward to that in May. But again, thank you all for coming, and thank you for supporting the Trust. We are the link between the museums, the licensees, the community groups, the Parks Department. We're a private nonprofit, and our goal is to substantively increase the support to protect, to preserve, and to enhance these priceless museums. Thank you.
Thank you, Highlander. And just to make this contemporary, the key words and the key letters with regard to the Historic House Trust of New York City are 501c3, which means it's a section of the Internal Revenue Code, and it means that all your contributions are tax deductible and gratefully received. Since 1982, now 15 years ago, the Library of America has been publishing the writings of the most enduring of America's novelists, poets, philosophers, political leaders, and historians. The Library of America is unique in that it prints these readings in attractive editions that are afforded and thus accessible. You are not paying for fine bindings with the Library of America. You are paying for the contents of the books. And there's a book they put out on Washington which is specifically quite good because it allows you to follow his entire career through his writings. The publisher of the Library of America has received a park name today. Mr. Apgar was Octagoner for this room for some time. Mr. Scott Heil, with us for a year now, it seems like, a year or more, is Highlander, and we try to find what we prefer is the name of a plant or an animal which is associated with books and libraries. So we've chosen, with his consent, bookworm. To honor Mr. Rudin, I'd like to introduce him to you now, the publisher of the Library of America, Bookworm.
I'm nearly speechless with the honor of my new name. Thank you, Commissioner Stern. On behalf of the Library of America, welcome, and thank you for helping to celebrate the publication of this authoritative new collection of Washington's speeches and writings. You know, when the idea for this collection was first proposed, it seemed a bit strange. We don't think of Washington as a writer, like Jefferson and Franklin, Paine, Lincoln, but as a man of action. So what's he doing in the Library of America alongside great American writers? Why read George Washington? Well, for one thing, he lived in a pretty exciting time. The 450 documents that editor John Rodehamel has collected here can have you on the edge of your seat because they were written in the midst of revolution and war, Western exploration, political struggle, and nation building. And George Washington was at the center of these events. He personally dominated American life for nearly a quarter century as commander of the Continental Army, president of the Constitutional Convention, and then chief executive for 8 critical years. So one reason to read the book is that it's a first-hand eyewitness history of the most crucial period in American history. But there's another way to read it, and that's as autobiography. How was it that an undereducated rural colonial farmer with a hot temper, not an intellectual and not particularly eloquent, was able to lead a ragtag American army in an apparently hopeless fight against the most formidable military power in the world and win, mold 13 bickering, jealous states into a lasting federal union, preside over the creation of a controversial national political charter and make it work, define the office of the American presidency? How was it and what was it? Part of the answer is Washington's extraordinary worldliness. Read his writing and you begin to understand. Whether he's surveying land, buying it, selling tobacco, running an estate, commanding an army, or helping to establish the most successful Republican government in history, Washington is a man of enormous practical intelligence and personal force. He understood power and how to use it in war, in diplomacy, in politics, and in business. But there's another answer that's also there in the writing, something even more important: qualities of character and what the 18th century would have called virtue. Washington, so adept at power, was not corrupted by it. His final and most astonishing achievement of all was that twice, as general and as president, he voluntarily gave up his power and influence so that the republic could survive and flourish. Great acts that expressed in the public realm Washington's personal principles: his love of country, his self-command, his essential civility, and his respect for others. This collection brings together public and private papers. If you read it, you'll see there's the continuity between the rules of civility, which Commissioner Stern mentioned, a private document Washington copied at age 15 to set personal standards of civility, respect, and deference to others, a continuity between that document and his later public renunciations of power out of respect and deference for the fledgling republic. As another, later Library of America author, Robert Frost, said of him, George Washington was one of the few in the whole history of the world who was not carried away by power. His contemporaries also recognized this, and their tribute is even more remarkable. You know, when King William IV, George III's son, heard reports that Washington had retired to Mount Vernon after leading the victorious army in the Revolutionary War, he said, "If that's true, then he's the greatest man who ever lived." Napoleon Bonaparte, on his deathbed at St. Helena, said, "They wanted me to be another Washington." American Fisher Ames probably summed it up in the fewest words. He said, "Washington changed mankind's idea of political greatness." Nowadays, Washington can seem remote from us, his vivid humanity eclipsed by his myth. That remoteness is a bad thing, because his example has a lot to teach us today, not only about how and why our country was founded, but also about how personal qualities like manners, character, and honor relate to larger issues of history and politics. The best way to understand this, to understand his reputation among his contemporaries, to understand his achievement as a statesman and as a man, is to read his writings. In that spirit, we offer readers this living record, in his own words, of a great American leader and hero. Now on to the main event. Late in life, someone remarked to Washington that his pleasurable anticipation of retirement showed in his face, and Washington turned to the man and said, "You are wrong. My countenance never yet betrayed my feelings." The 18th century idea of character was a role, a part you played, until it became who you were. And among his many other facets, Washington was a consummate actor. So we're especially pleased to read from the book, another consummate actor. If this were a TV commercial, Barry Bostwick could say, "I'm not George Washington, but I've played him on television." Barry played the first president in the award-winning CBS miniseries. His distinguished career has included dramatic and musical theater, feature films, TV movies, miniseries, specials, and series too numerous to list. He won a Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical for Robert Bridegroom, and a Golden Globe as Best Supporting Actor in the miniseries War and Remembrance. He's earned his own place in American history by creating the role of Danny Zuko in the first production of Grease, and portraying Brad Majors, the hero in Rocky Horror Picture Show. He recently returned to Broadway to star in Nick and Nora, based on a novel by Dashiell Hammett, another important writer we'll be getting to in a few years, so we could start planning that event now. And as everyone here probably knows, he currently plays the mayor of New York on the ABC comedy series Spin City, Barry Bostwick.
First of all, if you want to buy another house where George Washington slept, my house is for sale in California. I just thought I'd throw that in. And first of all, it's an honor to be here today and to celebrate in some small way George Washington's birthday, one of my great heroes. And I do humbly beseech you, as in his farewell address, that you forgive me my errors today. And I hope to keep you awake. Goes back to one of the first speeches today. You have to follow this thing. You see, it's okay. All right. First of all, I was looking at this poster here, and I was saying to myself, the one thing I wish I had done when I played George Washington was to convince them to change the shape of my nose. You see, my nose isn't quite George Washington's nose, and they kept on saying to me, but if you put a prosthetic nose on, we're shooting in the middle of summer in Virginia, it'll keep on falling off. And you'll just extend the shooting for about a month or two because we're constantly replacing your nose. So I hunkered under their good advice, unfortunately. But I do regret that. I don't really look like. I'm about the same height, though. I'm 6'4". He was, what, 6'3"? 6'3" and a quarter, something like that? I'm looking to you. Yes.
Maybe you can report it to 6'2" and 6'3".
6'2" and 6'3". Okay, good. Thank you. You seem to be the expert in the house.
Nobody's ever said they measured them, so I don't know where this comes from.
Yeah, and they didn't allow me to lie in his bed in Mount Vernon, so I couldn't really tell. In 1748, a 16-year-old George Washington joined a surveying expedition in the Shenandoah Valley, which was still frontier wilderness. And this first thing I want to read is from his journal. It's a journal of my journey over the mountains, began Friday the 11th of March, 1747-48. Friday, March 11th, 1747. Began my journey in company with George Fairfax, Esquire. We traveled this day 40 miles to Mr. George Neville's in Prince William County. I'm going to jump around in this journal. Sunday, March 13th. Rode to his lordship's quarter about 4 miles higher up the river. We went through most beautiful groves of sugar trees and spent the best part of the day in admiring the trees and richness of the land. Tuesday, the 15th. We set out early with intent to run around the said land, but being taken in a rain and it increasing very fast, obliged us to return. It clearing about 1 o'clock and our time being too precious to lose, we a second time ventured out and worked hard till night and then returned to Pennington's. We got our suppers and was lighted into a room, and I, not being so good a woodsman as the rest of my company, stripped myself very orderly and went into the bed, as they called it, when to my surprise I found it to be nothing but a little straw, matted together without sheets or anything else, but only one threadbare blanket, with double its weight of vermin, such as lice, fleas, etc. I was glad to get up as soon as the light was carried from us and put on my clothes and lay as my companions. Had we not have been very tired, I am sure we should not have slept much that night. I made a promise not to sleep so from that time forward, choosing rather to sleep in the open air before a fire, as will appear hereafter. Monday, the 21st. We went over in a canoe and traveled up the Maryland side all the day in a continued rain to Colo. Cresaps, right against the mouth of South Branch, about 40 miles from Pokes, I believe the worst road that ever was trod by man or beast. Wednesday, the 23rd. Rained till about 2 o'clock and cleared when we were agreeably surprised at the sight of 30-odd Indians coming from war with only one scalp. We had some liquor with us, of which we gave them part of it, elevating their spirits. Put them in the humor of dancing, of whom we had a war dance. Their manner of dancing is as follows. They clear a large circle and make a great fire in the middle, and then seats themselves around it. The speaker makes a grand speech telling them in what manner they are to dance. After he has finished, the best dancer jumps up as one awakened out of a sleep and runs and jumps about the ring in a most comical manner. He is followed by the rest. Then begins their musicians to play the music. There's a pot half of water with a deerskin stretched over it as tight as it can be, and a gourd with some shot in it to rattle, and a piece of an horse's tail tied to it to make it look fine. The one keeps rattling, the other drumming, all the while the others is dancing. Tuesday, the 29th. This morning went out and surveyed 500 acres of land and went down to one Michael Stumps on the South Fork of the Branch. On our way, shot 2 wild turkeys. Friday, April the 1st. This morning shot twice at wild turkeys, but killed none. Apparently he wasn't a very good shot. Run of 3 lots and returned to camp. Monday the 4th. This morning, Mr. Fairfax left us with intent to go down to the mouth of the branch. We did 2 lots and was attended to by a great company of people, men, women, and children that attended us through the woods as we went, showing their antic tricks. I really think they seemed to be as ignorant a set of people as the Indians. They would never speak English, but when spoken to, they speak all Dutch. This day, our tent was blown down by the violentness of the wind. What goes around comes around. Saturday the 9th, set the surveyors to work whilst Mr. Fairfax and myself stayed at the tent, our provisions being all exhausted, and the person that was to bring us, a recruit, disappointing us, and we were obliged to go without until we could get some from the neighbors, which was not until about 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. When we then took our leaves of the rest of our company, rode down to John Collins in order to set off next day homewards. Wednesday, the 13th of April, 1748, Mr. Fairfax got safe home, and I myself safe to my brothers, which concludes my journal. In 1775, Washington assumed command of the Continental Army with some misgivings. And here's what he wrote to his wife, Martha. To Martha Washington, my dearest, Philadelphia, June 18, 1775. I am now set down to write to you on a subject which fills me with inexpressible concern. And this concern is greatly aggravated and increased when I reflect on the uneasiness I know it will give you. It has been determined in Congress that the whole army raised for the defense of the Americas cause shall be put under my care, and that it is necessary for me to proceed immediately to Boston to take upon me the command of it. You may believe me, my dear Patsy, when I assure you in the most solemn manner that so far from seeking this appointment, I have used every endeavor in my power to avoid it, not only from my unwillingness to part with you and the family, but from a consciousness of its being a trust too great for my capacity, and that I should enjoy more real happiness and felicity in 1 month with you at home than I have the most distant prospect of reaping abroad if my stay was to be 7 times 7 years. But, as it has been a kind of destiny that has thrown me upon this service, I shall hope that my undertaking of it is designed to answer some good purpose. You might, and I suppose did, perceive from the tenor of my letters that I was apprehensive I could not avoid this appointment, as I did not even pretend to intimate when I should return that was the case. It was utterly out of my power to refuse this appointment without exposing my character to such censures as would have reflected dishonor upon myself and given pain to my friends. This, I am sure, could not and ought not to be pleasing to you, and must have lessened me considerably in my own esteem. I shall rely, therefore, confidently on that providence which has heretofore preserved and been bountiful to me, not doubting but that I shall return safe to you in the fall. I shall feel no pain from the toil or the danger of the campaign. My unhappiness will flow from the uneasiness I know you will feel at being left alone. I therefore beg of you to summon your whole fortitude and resolution and pass your time as agreeably as possible. Nothing will give me so much sincere satisfaction as to hear this, and to hear it from your own pen. In fall 1776, the Americans were retreating and New York City was lost to the British. In the next 2 letters written right here in this house, Washington describes the situation to his brother and his cousin. To John Augustine Washington, dear brother, Heights of Harlem, September 22nd, 1776. With respect to the attack and retreat from Long Island, the public papers would furnish you with accounts nearly true. I shall only add that in the former we lost about 800 men, more than 3/4 of which were taken to prisoners. I have gone the evening before to the main body of our army, which was posted about these heights in the plains of Harlem, where it seemed probable from the movements and disposition of the enemy they meant to land and make an attack the next morning. However, the event did not happen. Immediately on hearing the cannonade, I rode with all possible expedition towards a place of landing, and where breastworks had been thrown up to secure our men, and found the troops that had been posted there to my great surprise and mortification, and those ordered to their support, consisting of 8 regiments, notwithstanding the exertions of their generals to form them, running away in the most shameful and disgraceful manner. I used every possible effort to rally them, but to no purpose. And on the appearance of a small part of the army, not more than 60 or 70, they ran off without firing a single gun. I'm going to go back. I used every possible effort to rally them, but to no purpose. And on the appearance of a small part of the enemy, not more than 60 or 70, they ran off without firing a single gun. Many of our heavy cannon would inevitably have fallen into the enemy's hands as they landed so soon, but this scandalous conduct occasioned a loss of many tents, baggage, and camp equipage, which would have been easily secured had they made the least opposition. The retreat was made with a loss of a few men only. We encamped and still are on the heights of Haarlem, which are well calculated for defense against their approaches. The enemy, is said, are bringing up their heavy cannon, so that we are to expect another attack soon, both by land and water, as we are upon the Hudson or North River at the place where we have attempted to stop the navigation by sinking obstructions in the river and erecting batteries. The dependence which the Congress has placed upon the militia has already greatly injured, and I fear will totally ruin our cause. Being subject to no control themselves, they introduce disorder among the troops they have attempted to discipline, while the change in their living brings on sickness. This makes them impatient to get home, which spreads universally and introduces abominable desertions. In short, it is not in the power of words to describe the task I have to act. 50,000 pounds should not induce me again to undergo what I have done. Our numbers by sickness, desertion, is greatly reduced. I have been trying these 4 or 5 days to get a return, but have not yet succeeded. I am sure, however, we have not more than 12 or 14,000 men fit for duty, whilst the enemy, who is, it is said, are very healthy, cannot have less than near 25,000. And then to Lund, Washington. Dear Lund, this is at Colonel Morris's on the heights of Haarlem, September 30th, 1776. This time last year, I pointed out the evil consequences of short enlistments, the expenses of militia, and the little dependence that was placed in them. I assured that the longer they delayed raising a standing army, the more difficult and chargeable would they find it to get one, and that at the same time that the militia would answer no valuable purpose, the frequent calling them in would be attended with an expense that they would have no conception of. Whether, as I have said before, the unfortunate hope of reconciliation was the cause, or the fear of a standing army prevailed, I will not undertake to say, but the policy was to engage men for 12 months only, the consequence of which they have had great bodies of militia in pay that never were in camp. They have had immense quantities of provisions drawn by men that never rendered you 1 hour's service, at least usefully, and this in the most profuse and wasteful way. Your stores have been expended, and every kind of military destroyed by them. Your numbers fluctuating, uncertain, and forever far short of report at no one time. I believe equal to 20,000 men fit for duty. At present, our numbers fit for duty by this day's report amount to 14,759. Besides 3,427 on command, and the enemies within stone's throw of us. It is true a body of militia are again ordered out, but they come without any conveniences and soon return. I discharged a regiment the other day that had in it 14 rank and file, fit for duty only, and several that had less than 50. In short, such is my situation that I were to wish the bitterest curse to an enemy on this side of the grave, I should put him in my stead with my feelings, and yet I do not know what plan of conduct to pursue. I see the impossibility of serving with reputation, or doing any essential service to the cause by continuing in command. And yet I am told that if I quit the command, an inevitable ruin will follow from the distraction that will ensue. In confidence, I tell you that. I never was in such an unhappy, divided state since I was born. Tables turn. Washington writes to John Hancock a few months later. To John Hancock, Sir, Headquarters, Newtown, 27th December, 1776. I have the pleasure of congratulating you upon the success of an enterprise which I have formed against a detachment of the enemy lying in Trenton, and which was executed yesterday morning. The evening of the 25th, I ordered the troops intended for this service to parade back of McConkey's Ferry, that they might begin to pass as soon as it grew dark, imagining we should be able to throw them all over with the necessary artillery by 12 o'clock, and that we might easily arrive at Trenton by 5 in the morning, the distance being about 9 miles. But the quantity of ice made that night impeded the passage of boats so much that it was 3 o'clock before the artillery could all be got over, and nearly 4 before the troops took up their line of march. This made me despair of surprising the town, as I well knew we could not reach it before the day was fairly broke. But as I was certain there was no making a retreat without being discovered and harassing on repassing the river, I determined to push on at all events. I formed my detachment into 2 divisions, one to march by the lower or river road, the other by the upper or Pennington road. As the divisions had nearly the same distance to march, I ordered each of them immediately upon forcing the outguards to push directly into the town, that they might charge the enemy before they had time to form. The upper division arrived at the enemy's advance post exactly at 8 o'clock, and in 3 minutes later I found from the fire on the lower road that that division had also got up. The outguards made but small opposition, though for their numbers they behaved very well, keeping up a constant retreating fire from behind houses. We presently saw their main body formed, but from their motions they seemed undetermined how to act. Being hard-pressed by our troops, who had already got possession of part of the artillery, they attempted to file off by a road on their right leading to Princeton. But perceiving their intention, I threw a body of troops in their way, which immediately checked them. Finding from our disposition that they were surrounded and that they must inevitably be cut to pieces if they made any further resistance, they agreed to lay down their arms. In justice to the officers and men, I must add that their behavior upon this occasion reflects the highest honor upon them. The difficulty of passing the river in a very severe night and their march through a violent storm of snow and hail did not in the least abate their ardor. But when they came to the charge, each seemed to vie with the other in pressing forward. And were I to give a preference to any particular corps, I should do great injustice to the others. I chose one thing. In the mini-series, really our intention was to also humanize, I think, George Washington, and to really show you a side of the man that you never really read about or saw. And we had dramatized somewhat of this letter that he wrote to Martha's granddaughter, Eleanor Parke Custis. And I thought it was interesting because it does show you the man who's giving advice to his granddaughter. To Eleanor Parke Custis, Philadelphia, January 16th, 1795. Dear Nellie, your letter, the receipt of which I am now acknowledging, is written correctly and in fair characters, which is an evidence that you command, when you please, a fair hand. Possessed of these advantages, it will be your own fault if you do not avail yourself of them, and attention being paid to the choice of your subjects, you can have nothing to fear from the malignancy of criticism, as your ideas are lively and your descriptions agreeable. Let me touch a little now on your Georgetown ball, and happy, thrice happy, for the fair who were assembled on that occasion, that there was a man to spare. For had there been 79 ladies and only 78 gentlemen, there might, in the course of the evening, have been some disorder among the caps, notwithstanding the apathy which one of the company entertains for the youth of the present day, and her determination never to give herself a moment's uneasiness on account of any of them. A hint here. Men and women feel the same inclinations to each other now that they always have done, and which they will continue to do until there is a new order of things and you, as others have done, may find perhaps that the passions of your sex are easier raised than allayed. Do not therefore boast too soon or too strongly of your insensibility to it or resistance of its powers. In the composition of the human frame, there is a good deal of inflammable matter. However dormant it may lie for a time, and like an intimate acquaintance of yours, when the torch is put to it, that which is within you may burst into a blaze. For which reason, and especially too as I have entered upon the chapter of vices, I will read you a lecture drawn from this text. Love is said to be an involuntary passion, and it is therefore contended that it cannot be resisted. This is true in part only, for like all things else, when nourished and supplied plentifully with aliment, it is rapid in its progress. But let these be withdrawn, and it may be stifled in its birth and much stinted in its growth. For example, a woman, the same may be said of the other sex, all beautiful and accomplished, will, while her hand and heart are undisposed of, turn the heads and set the circle in which she moves on fire. Let her marry, and what is the consequence? The madness ceases, and all is quiet again. Why? Well, not because there are any diminution in the charms of the lady, but because there is an end of hope. Hence it follows that love may, and therefore ought to be, under the guidance of reason. For although we cannot avoid first impressions, we may assuredly place them under guard. And my motives for treating on this subject are to show you, while you remain Eleanor Parke Custis, spinster, and retain the resolution to love with moderation, the propriety of adhering to the latter resolution, at least until you have secured your game and the way by which it may be accomplished. When the fire is beginning to kindle and your heart growing warm, propound these questions to it. Who is the invader? Have I a competent knowledge of him? Is he a man of good character, a man of sense? For be assured, a sensible woman can never be happy with a fool. What has been his walk in life? Is he a gambler, a spendthrift, or a drunkard? Is his fortune sufficient to maintain me in the manner I have been accustomed to live and my sisters do live? And is he one to whom my friends can have no reasonable objection? If these interrogatories can be satisfactorily answered, there will remain but one more to be asked. That, however, is an important one. Have I sufficient ground to conclude that his affections are engaged by me? Without this, the heart of sensibility will struggle against a passion that is not reciprocated. Delicacy, custom, or call it by what epithet you will, having precluded all advances on your part. The declaration, without the most indirect invitation of yours, must proceed from the man to render it permanent and valuable, and nothing short of good sense and an easy, unaffected conduct can draw the line between prudery and coquetry. It would be no great departure from truth to say that it rarely happens otherwise than that a thoroughly paced coquette dies in celibacy as a punishment for her attempts to mislead others by encouraging looks, words, or actions given for no other purpose than to draw men on, to make overtures that they may then reject. That's good advice. In just a second, we will be having some refreshments, I think, out in front. And I just wanted to add a couple of the rules of civility that perhaps pertain to what you will soon be partaking in. While you are talking, point not with your finger at him of whom you discourse, nor approach too near him to whom you talk, especially to his face. Being set at meat, scratch not, neither spit, cough, or blow your nose, except there's a necessity for it. Take no salt or cut bread with your knife greasy. Put not your meat in your mouth with your knife in your hand, neither spit forth the stones of any fruit put upon a dish, nor cast anything under the table. Rinse not your mouth in the presence of others. If others talk at table, be attentive, but talk not with meat in your mouth. And finally, labor to keep alive in your breast that little spark of celestial fire called conscience. Finis. Thank you.
That was quite wonderful. Not only a beautiful reading, but I'm sure gave many of us insights into George Washington that we never had before, knowing him as a president in a capital, not as a person. We've worked out a park name for you, with your consent, which, I mean, we're just in such a venerable mood now, to say it, but we've chosen, this is Barry Bostwick, and we've chosen Brad, his starring role in the Rocky Horror Show, which he's popularly known. Listen, if you were Shakespeare, it might have been Hamlet, but you're Brad, and it works both alliteratively and in style and force, and you'll receive your proper award. By the way, we had a speaker on Lincoln's birthday. We had Fritz Weaver, who recited the Gettysburg Address in Union Square, appropriately, and we named him Honest Abe. But I don't know, the only George I think it was Curious George, which is certainly not appropriate. Now, I want to thank you very much from all of us at Parks for that very passionate and moving reading. It's very appropriate that you read today, not only because you once portrayed George Washington, but because Monday is also your birthday. Right. That is February 24th. Just 2 days after George Washington. And we're delighted that you could take time out of your busy schedule to do an event for the city of New York and for the real mayor. You know, he plays the mayor in Spin City. Everyone knows that Michael J. Fox plays the deputy mayor, but the deputy mayor works for the mayor. And Barry...
Tell the writers that, yeah.
Yes, well, is the real mayor. Well, even in, what was the movie? The movie City Hall.
Yeah.
Of course, the movie City Hall was written by a deputy mayor, by a former deputy mayor, so they didn't do proper justice to the mayor. Anyway, I'd like to invite everyone here, and I'm so pleased that all of you came, and I want to thank you for coming on a day like this to not only enjoy yourselves and be here and listen to a great actor, but to pay your respects to General Washington. And it's marvelous. You know, 265 years after our birthdays, I guess mine would be in 2200. I don't expect a celebration of this sort, many of us, but it is wonderful that there are figures of such greatness that after a quarter of a millennium, they're still regarded with high honor and favor. And when we're talking about things named for him, and we talked about the bridge and the city and the state and the university, let's not forget the monument, very in its own right. And now let us dine. Thank you very much.